I'm sorry it took me so long. I kept trying to get it to work, but it just kept crashing
Yeah,
on me.
we
So
saw that.
it looks like it's working this time.
I decided to kill some time. We decided to play some videos. We gave away the very first free ticket of the 8 that we're giving away today. Um, as a matter of fact,
Nice.
I don't know what kind of time that you've got, but how would you like to be the guy to interview Doug Weed at 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock Eastern. Yeah, I could probably do that.
Yeah, in the next 30 minutes, he should be here, and I couldn't think of a better person to do it than yourself.
Well, thank you so much. Am I coming across? I see a comment that says I can't hear Josh.
I hear you
Okay,
just
somebody
fine.
can hear me.
You're actually a little
Okay.
louder than normal.
Man, I don't know what was going on. It just took forever to get us connected here, but I'm glad we finally worked it out.
Yeah, so am I. Well, Josh, I'm going to give you the floor, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Josh
All
Tolley.
right. I think great might be an overstatement, but I'm glad to be here. I'm excited about what this represents too. This represents a continuation. You know, so many people thought, oh, by now all you Ron people would be quiet and back in your houses or your huts and just licking your wounds. But no, that's not the case. And this movement continues to grow. It continues to carry steam, and as we're heading in towards August, it's not slowing down, and I love that. I love that we're not listening to the mainstream media. You know what's really funny about the mainstream media? They almost covered us. They almost covered this movement. They kind of hinted at it and said, okay, well, here it is, but then, well, now Romney's the nominee. And they thought everything would just end and go away, and it didn't. So I'm very, very excited about this push. And I'm really encouraged by it. You know, I was like, oh, man, we get some callers on the show and we get some emails. Josh, we might as well just give up. And I keep telling people, as long as there's breath left in you, there's no reason to give up. I'd rather go out fighting than just stand here and then let it just happen to us. Now I'm hoping I can improve this video a little bit because there is a delay. So let me see if I can fix that. Ah, no, it doesn't. Well, you know why? You know why I can't fix it? Because I have a face for radio, so it doesn't really matter anyway. So I'm excited to kind of see what everybody's thinking and how everybody's feeling towards the future, and as we move towards August and we move towards November. There's a lot of confusion about what's going to happen, and just look what happened last week. So much media about, well, you know, he's not going to be allowed to speak. He is going to be allowed to speak, and just this idea that, again, it's up to the RNC. And isn't it odd that we find ourselves in a position where the RNC is controlling the outcome? And what I mean by that is we have this situation where about 8 months ago, everybody was getting excited, say, okay, this is Ron Paul's year. And then, of course, the RNC tried to exclude him from the conversation. The media wouldn't cover him. But his crowds increased, and as people started putting footage on YouTube of, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people at an event, the media finally gave him some, at least acknowledgement. And then as we got closer to this month, the RNC tried to put their foot down on certain events. Obviously, the one we're talking about today is a great example of that. And we're just experiencing this movement within the RNC, and again we're at this place where the RNC is going to try to flex its control. They're going to try to say, well, okay, even if we allow him to speak, this is what he's allowed to speak on. And you know that conversation is happening, what he's allowed to bring up if he is given any time at all. And I just say we need to stop allowing this conversation to be dictated by the people who we're opposing. I don't understand the mindset that, we're opposed to what the RNC is doing, so we need to follow the RNC's rules. Granted, it's a private club. Granted, it's their event. But that's why there's other events happening, to give the people a voice. And recently, people have been saying, well, finally it's over. Nothing is over. Let me tell you something. Regardless of how August turns out, this is not over. It's just beginning. Matter of fact, even if it went our direction and everything went fine in August, it still would have been just a beginning. So this whole idea that, okay, that's all we got to do. We got to get Ron Paul the nomination. That wasn't the objective anyway. You know what's really funny about that? Now that this connection seems to be working and I'm getting ahead of steam here, we need to look at what victory actually is. Victory isn't getting him a speaking spot. They're going to try to convince you that it is. They're going to try to convince you that, well, see what we did for your candidate? We gave him a speaking spot. Now will you just shut up? No, that's not victory. They're going to try to convince us that, his platform is being accepted. Certain aspects of the Ron Paul platform will be accepted into the Republican Party's platform. That's not victory either. Victory is the restoration of freedom, a country that is ran by the people, of the people, for the people, and that government, which is in place to influence the people, adheres to the Constitution of the United States. Short of that, there is no victory. So we have to continually fight until we have that as our platform, as our victory. So just keep that in mind. Don't settle. Don't compromise. Don't say, oh well, at least they gave him an opportunity. No, the opportunity is for us to continue this cause for freedom. The opportunity is for us to continue charging forward and letting people know why this fight is so important in the first place. Because if you've noticed, especially since the announcement of Paul Ryan as Romney's choice for VP, they're trying to circle the entire conversation around economic recovery. So what? So what? China is going through economic recovery. Russia is going through economic recovery. Venezuela is having a form of economic recovery. Economic recovery is not what the conversation should be about. The conversation needs to be about freedom. The conversation needs to be about liberty. I'm sick and tired of compromising the number one issue that should be at the forefront of every election cycle for economic recovery. What if a liberal had a great plan for economic recovery, but they wanted to regulate religion, or they wanted to regulate the internet, or they wanted to regulate transportation? Let's say somebody came along and says, hey, I have the perfect plan. Everybody in the country will make $75,000 a year. There's going to be 0% unemployment. However, you have to allow us to search without cause everything you do on the internet, and you have to take part of a federal ID Act. Would you be willing to say, okay, it's for me? And the problem is most of our mainstream Republican candidates, that is for them. They're willing to sell anything for economic recovery. Now, I'm not a person who's against economic recovery. For goodness sakes, I wrote the book, Quit Your Job or Die, Discover the Importance of Self-Employment. So I understand why we need economic recovery. I even understand how we need to get there. But nothing is worth selling freedom and liberty for. And that's the decision that we're making right now as a people on all sides of the political spectrum. If you're a liberal, if you're a Green Party, if you're a libertarian, if you're progressive, doesn't matter what you are. Right now, the conversation that we're having in the back of the room while everybody's talking about economic recovery in the front of the room is what we're willing to give up. Because whenever the government does something, even if it's something great like economic recovery, nothing is free. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to give up for economic recovery? And right now, the majority of Americans seem as if they're okay giving up everything for economic recovery. And that to me, the exchange is just too high. I cannot settle for those. I'm not willing to give up anything. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. So to even entertain the idea that economic recovery is worth selling our future for is absolutely just asinine. And it's always an illusion anyway. Here's the other thing I don't understand and why people are just, it just blows my mind. Well, Josh, I trust them this time. Wait a second. This government, the system of government that you have, the two-party system that we've had for well over 100 years now, they've lied to you time and time again, yet you're going to trust them this time? Really? Why? What track record do they show that gives you the idea that, yep, this time I can trust them? We're like battered wives, and I'm not saying you and I specifically, but you know what I'm saying, us as the citizens of this nation. We're like battered wives. They beat us and then say, oh, come here, baby, I love you, I won't do it again. And then they do it again. So even if they did have a wonderful plan about economic recovery or job stimulus or whatever it is, why do we trust them? The point here needs to be, I don't care who's running Washington, D.C. That's not where freedom is lived out. That's not where jobs are created in the first place. Any politician who can promise you economic recovery doesn't understand economics. That should be red flag number one. So you just have to make sure you continue to have these conversations with people in your neighborhood, with people you work with, and just get back to what really advances freedom and liberty. Do you know what really advances it? It's not a candidate. Even if it's a great candidate and the one we're here to support, it's not a candidate. It's you. It's me. It's us living it out. It's us realizing that there is nothing more precious than freedom and liberty. It's what allows us to disagree yet be united. And isn't that a wonderful thing to have? And to be honest with you, I think that's something this movement needs too. We need to have the freedom to not agree yet still remain united. And if they can divide us, which is exactly what they're trying to do, then that unification falls apart and the fight for freedom dies in the process. So as we continue to also fight for freedom, we also have to fight for unity. Let's say you're a devout atheist, else in this room is a devout Buddhist. Why the hell are you talking about religion? Why? You know that by its very nature, you guys are going to disagree. So why create unity around the disagreement? I mean, this is basic business 101. You don't come into a relationship, and that's exactly what it is when you're teaming up with somebody to push for somebody as president or to push for political action. You don't come into a relationship pointing out each other's differences. You come together unified over your similarities. So it blows me away, especially recently, all the talk about the things that divide. Class warfare, race, religious preference, sexual preference, like all these things that have nothing to do with advancing our cause. Why are we even wasting a breath arguing about things that don't advance our cause? Now, outside of this cause, if you want to advance your Taoist principles, awesome, great. But it's just stupidity on a kindergarten level, especially when the entire world is pushing against us, that those who are willing to fight for freedom and liberty are fighting amongst each other. It's just stupid. So don't do that. Don't do that. Make sense? What else would I like to cover? If anybody has questions, feel free to ask questions, because when I was coming on, this thing wasn't working with me. So it's not like I prepared a series of talking points or something. I think one of the other things that we need to realize is, what is our ability? Where do we get the weapons to fight for freedom and liberty? What does that look like? I mean, a lot of people are making this ill-conceived idea that at some point we just need to march into Washington and take over. Well, what does that look like? How do we take what we have and use it to our advantage when we're looking to advance freedom? And here's something, that people kind of fall into too. We think, okay, well, we want freedom, we want liberty, so the best thing to do is try to regulate it. And we see that a lot. There are a lot of, let's just say, uneducated people who are trying to advance this cause, who think that we need to do it by passing more regulation. It's the regulation that got us in this place in the first place. It's got us behind the eight ball before we even queue up, because we're fighting against our own system of regulations. What if they came out with a thing that said, well, it's illegal to have a Ron Paul bumper sticker? Remember 4 years ago, Missouri They were actually talking about that very issue. Oh, well, they have a Ron Paul bumper sticker. We might have to think of them as a potential terrorist. And then I see in discussion boards this idea, well, what we need to do to preserve freedom is pass more regulation. Regulation is like a loaded weapon. Even if you're going to use it for a good purpose, it's always dangerous. So we need to realize that, and we need to realize that to advance freedom, we don't regulate it, we live it. We need to live small business. I cannot emphasize enough how important small business is to this movement. We need to start more small businesses in all different industries. It just needs to be something that grows and flourishes. Because when you do that, people will have this natural tendency to come to the right conclusion. That's why I love talking to small business owners, because you don't have to tell them, the secrets behind the Federal Reserve. You don't need to tell them who the Rothschilds are. You don't need to tell them about chemtrails or whatever else you want to tell them about. All you have to do is lead them into business, and then when they realize that something is happening there.
Well, Josh will be back in a moment. Little technical snafu. I never actually left. I was just, I had to take a short restroom break and came back and saw Josh was down. There he is.
I don't know what it is today. You have those days where things just don't seem to go right, and this seems to be one of those days. So I apologize for that.
Not a problem.
So what we were talking about, hey, what's up, people? Hey, Gigi Bowman, I see she's in the room. I'm sorry. Okay, everybody can understand me, right? Everybody can hear me? Sweet. All right, so let's talk about what else we need to advance this call. We need to take what we know, whether it's Austrian economics or the importance of a libertarian message, or how to pass a bill, like all the information we know, and we need to lead people to the conclusion. See, one of the things we're doing is there's a large amount of people who know something's wrong, and that's why we've had the growth and the success we've had. They're open to the idea that, hey, I need to look elsewhere. But the truth is, a vast majority of people don't have that mindset. And they don't have that mindset for a few different reasons. People have a tendency to create barriers around beliefs. Now, this might get a little deep, but I have like 20 minutes before Doug Weed gets here. So when people have a belief, it's an accepted truth. It doesn't even have to be fact. And then I think that's an important distinction to make. When you're talking to your neighbor, and your neighbor doesn't understand what you're talking about, or they listen to Hannity so much that they just think, okay, Paul Ryan's the next Ronald Reagan, whatever it happens to be, it's because of an accepted truth. An accepted truth is a belief. So when you approach an issue, in order to get people to understand it and to accept it and to take action, go in there and start beating belief systems. People will naturally defend that belief system, even if it's wrong. Even if they wake up to the fact it's wrong, they're still going to argue you and fight you, because it's almost like a self-defense mechanism. What you have to do instead is you have to get into a conversation, you have to discover what their belief system is, and then lead them to their own conclusion. I think I was on with Timont or somebody. I was on with somebody, and somebody asked me, well, Josh, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I said, no, actually the opposite is true. You can lead a horse to anything and make them drink if you make the horse thirsty first. And how you make a horse thirsty is you create questions in their minds and you don't give them the answer. Let me say that again. You create questions in their minds and you don't give them the answer. One of the reasons why this movement has gotten so big and so fast in the past 4 to 8 years is because everybody was asking questions, and there weren't enough people to give answers, so everybody was out doing their own research, and that's exactly how we all met up, coincidentally, at the same result. How many times have you heard an interview with, I don't know, Jeremy Richter or whoever, and you hear the story of how they became a Ron Paul supporter? And it's always, well, I saw a documentary, and they said a key word like Austrian economics, and I looked into it, and it ran me into Ron Paul. Or I saw the documentary America, Freedom to Fascism, and it made me question things. So I started doing research, and it led me to Ron Paul. I have yet to met somebody who 50 super brochures at me, started telling me that I'm an idiot if I vote for Mitt Romney, I'm a fool if I vote for Barack Obama, and that if I don't vote for Ron Paul, the world's going to end. I've never seen that conversation. And the reason I've never seen that conversation is because when you do that, when you try to berate people one-on-one, it creates a defense mechanism. Make sense? And you might be saying, well, Josh, isn't that exactly what you and others do on the radio? I mean, you're kind of insulting people. In a way, that's true. But the difference is we're not doing it one-on-one. See, the other wonderful thing that we know about mental sciences is when you insult people and the people are part of a larger group, they don't feel insulted. It's kind of odd, but comedians are a great example of that. Comedians, if they were to look at you one-on-one and say, you're fat and ugly, you would be mad, you would leave, you would slap them maybe. But if a comedian's up on stage and he's like, oh my goodness, America is such a pathetic place. Look at all you fat and ugly people out there. McDonald's has to be just loving it. Not only would you not be offended, you would actually laugh. Yet the same message was just delivered. So, and I know this is kind of deep, but it's powerful stuff. And we have to remember, when you're talking one-on-one with your coworker, you're not talking to a crowd, so don't insult him. Don't go after his belief system. He's just going to reject you. Leave it up to us in this new media all day long, and they'll actually tune in because they love it. When you're talking to people, you need to do so in a way that gets them thinking and asking questions. Make sense? I'll give you another example that I love to use because it's so obvious that it kind of makes people laugh. We had a guest on the show. He was the writer-producer of What in the World Are They Spraying? He's actually been on the show a couple times. And it's a very fascinating topic, this idea that there's stuff being sprayed in the air. And after the show, I was talking to him a little bit about, people who use the show and people who are scared now of what they're putting in the air, and how there's this pushback of rejection. How they say, oh, well, there's nothing in the skies. That's just normal. What? Chemtrails? Oh, give me a break. And what I was kind of trying to explain and get across is whenever you want to bring up a subject like chemtrails, there's obviously a belief system attached to it. So instead of telling people, well, don't you understand there's aluminum chloride in the air? Instead, you just say, well, if it's really the case where exhaust is freezing and it's just permanently staying there because it's cold, well, then why can't I drive to work in the winter and then follow my own trail back? And it leads people to question, well, you know what? Actually, you're right. And just that simple little question makes people think and want an answer. If you were to tell people, well, they're spraying the skies and it has to do with the Council of Foreign Relations, and next thing you know, they're going to say, oh man, go turn on Alex Jones or something. This sounds like a conspiracy theory. But when you lead people to question things, there's no conspiracy theory there. See, that's the wonderful thing about this. Even if you look at the idea of a conspiracy theory, why is it considered a conspiracy? Why is the word theory used? Because you're challenging an already existing belief. Again, there's the word belief. So you just have to get around that. I know that's deep and it's completely off topic, but it was kind of fun to talk about. Does anybody have any questions for me? I would love to answer some questions. I see some people in the room I know. Hello, y'all. Hey, John. Hey, Tracy. Why am I so smart? Because it's the fluoride in the water. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Agenda 21. I'm not that smart. Thank you for the compliment, though. And hello to you, too. Agenda 21 in your thoughts. I think it's terrible. I think that people who are pushing Agenda 21 know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing exactly what I would tell them. To be honest, you aim small and you miss small. When you look at Agenda 21, their most successful efforts have been on the city level. You know, those city council meetings that you don't go to because everybody's focused on um, impacting the national elections. You would not believe the push of Agenda 21 in this move to usurp federal control. I have been to city council meetings in tiny, tiny towns, and they start talking about, um, you know, things like sustainable development and building codes. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Agenda 21. Fight it at every fight because it's real. Josh, what do you think? Every American should get armed. Um, I think every American should believe in the idea of being armed. Now, I don't believe every American should be armed, and I'll tell you why. Now, this is going to get weird if you don't understand what I'm saying. So, if you're a 90-year-old grandmother and you don't know how to use a weapon, you've never fired a weapon, it can actually be a danger to you to have that weapon. If a 90-year-old grandma pulls a gun that she's never used, never been trained with, and has never fired in her life, the bad guy can take that gun away from her and now can use the gun on grandma. So grandma should support that every American should have the ability to be armed. And because she supports that, it's more likely that there's going to be somebody who has moral fortitude that can save her from the bad guy. But I don't think she should necessarily have the gun. So I hope that makes sense. And that understanding and that outlook comes from a lot of years in martial arts. I spent a long time in high-risk security and similar um, industries, and I've trained a lot of people. So you really have to have that mental fortitude, that moral fortitude that says, you know what, I'm going to get the training I need, and I have the ability to make the decision to kill somebody if I needed to. So exactly, grandma just needs to be trained, and that's my point. So should everybody be? I would love it if everybody was. But I think everybody needs to make that moral gut check. There are people who just can't pull that trigger. And if you can't pull the trigger, then it actually becomes a liability. There's some other self-defense aspects that I would use in lieu of that. Josh, why aren't you on the security team? Because I hardly do that sort of work anymore. When I did that sort of work, it was very expensive and a lot of stuff that we can't really talk about.
Boy, Josh is just having a rough day at it, technology-wise. All right, I'll tell you what. While we're actually waiting for Josh to return, let's let the supercomputer pick another name for a free ticket. And for those of you that just joined, if you want to win one of the 8 free tickets that we're going to be giving away today, these are all-access 3-day passes to Paul Festival at the Tampa State Fairgrounds. You need to put your email. Just give us your first name and the city that you're at. If you actually win, obviously we're going to need more information from you to send you your ticket. It is paulfesttickets@gmail.com. Put your name in the hat, and we will absolutely get you into the drawing. And I see we have Josh back.
We do. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's the thunderstorm. I know we're having thunderstorms right now. I don't know if that has an effect on that. I'm not that smart on all this sort of stuff, but I don't know what's going on. Sorry about that.
It's not that big a deal. Just hold that thought 1 second. We've got the supercomputer picking the next winner of the free 3-day pass to Paul Fest. Okay, you can stop anytime and draw. There we go. The winner is, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Zila Miller. That's Zila Miller in Lauderhill, Florida. Zila, are you here in the room? If you're here in the room, announce yourself. Zila Miller. If you're not here, I'm going to have to draw another name. Zila Miller. We'll give her a few minutes to respond. Josh, go ahead and take the floor. And by the way, folks, if you're not in the room when we draw the name, we're going to draw somebody else. So you need to be here because we need some other information and things from you to get you a ticket, and we want to make sure that you're actually participating. So Zila Miller, let it be known that you're here, and we'll talk to you later. Josh, the floor is yours. We're waiting for Doug Weed.
Sounds good. Somebody asked me if I can switch to Internet Explorer. I'm going to try that right now. Maybe that'll work better. If it does, then we're going to have a better connection, especially when Doug gets here. Else also asked me about the Republic. Now, we had a very interesting guest on my show a couple weeks ago, and he was from this organization called the Republic of the United States. And very controversial. A lot of people were thinking, well, maybe it's not legit and all that sort of stuff. So what's my input? Very good question. I'm now on here twice, so I'm not sure what that's about. Don't you just love technology? Okay, I can't get that one to work, so we're just gonna stay here. Here's my input on the Republic idea. I think that I understand why they're doing it. They're doing it for the same reason why the rest of us are trying to push for liberty and freedom. They understand that America has been usurped. I mean, in all reality, the country that we think we live in doesn't exist. So they formulated their own version of the government, and they're going to try to replace the current existing government, which is technically not a government at all, but instead is a corporation. Now, there's really two issues here. The first one is, are they right, and what do I think about that? And are they going about it in the right way with their organization? I believe they have a lot of merit to what they're saying. I believe that the whole idea that our government is operating in a way that violates the Constitution is absolutely real. I think that is dead on. Now, I would advise them to go on a different strategic route to accomplishing their goals. I think some of the things that they're doing in order to achieve the goals kind of push them back in their efforts, to be honest with you. I think there's going to be some pushback eventually that's going to be a hindrance to them if they don't go about it in a different way. But bottom line is, it's another group of people who are just as frustrated as the rest of us saying, hey, we got to do something different here because what we've been doing so far doesn't work. This idea that we can elect the right candidate and everything's going to take care of itself isn't reality. Reality is we need to change the entire system from the bottom up, and that's what they're trying to do. So, what else? Josh, do you think senators should have term limits? Yeah, I do. Not only should they have term limits, I don't think the government should be a full-time job. I don't. I think the government should be something that you're in the private sector, and just like if you're in the reserves, right? If you're in the reserves or the National Guard, you pull your weekend duty and then you do your 2 weeks in the summer or whatever. I think government should work the exact same way. You do your job, you come to D.C., you do your governance, and then you go back to live with the results that you just created. We would see a completely different country if the people who made the laws then had to go live in that mindset with those people who they just made the laws with. I mean, the entire system would just change radically. But what we have now is a situation where government could become an industry. You can be a professional politician. Well, politicians need people to govern. And in order to stay relevant, they need problems to continue. So the way it sits right now, there's really no possibility for success in carrying out the continuation and the advancement of freedom, because if we did, it would go against their career. Politicians need a problem to exist in order for their relevance to remain. If they fixed it, they wouldn't remain relevant. So if they actually provided us what we want, they would be out of a job. See what I'm saying? So yeah, I think it would be wonderful if they were part-time senators and congressmen and full-time civilians. That way they would have to live with their decisions too. Josh, do you think that Americans should start actively participating in their future? Yeah. And use that activity as their weapon? Yes. Yes. See, the problem, that's a great point. The problem here is we're so complacent. And even a lot of people in the freedom movement, we just want to elect the right guy so it takes care of itself. It doesn't work that way. You have to be active. This isn't fantasy football. You know what we've turned politics into? We've turned it into fantasy football. You pick the guy you like. I'm going to pick the guy I like. We're going to send them into the game in D.C., and then we're going to see what happens, and the winner scores points on a scorecard, because in actuality, that's what political organizations, or at least political monitoring organizations, do. They issue scorecards. So we have to get past that. We have to become active in our own lives and stop playing fantasy football with Washington, D.C. That's actually pretty good. I like that. I should use that again. Does anyone have any... Wait, I missed that. Josh, what is the Weather Service buying hollow point bullets? I have no clue. No, the NOAA, the National Ocean Air whatever, NOAA, they said that that was actually a typo, that it wasn't actually the National Weather Service, it was another organization under their umbrella, but it's still equally as alarming. And there's a story on Drudge today talking about how the Social Security Administration has just bought 174,000 rounds of ammunition. I don't know why. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but that is a little odd. I'm not going to lie to you. That's
show it to me.
Odd. I'm not sure what that was, but that was odd as well. How do we get the media to cover our candidate? Easy. You change the media. Now, this is what I mean by changing the media. The media is politically loyal. I mean, there's no doubt about it that the left stream media goes with the left and the right stream media goes with the right. I'm going to get to the Chris Dwayne question in a second, because he's actually a friend of mine, so I'll get to that in a second. But in order to change the media, we have to realize what the media is. The media is still a business. They will go towards business. That's why they love promoting the fight between the right and the left. They don't care who wins. They want the fight to continue, because you're going to continue watching. If you can continue watching, then they're going to continue to sell advertising space at a rising rate. We're going to spend over $2 billion this election cycle. $2 billion. So they don't care who wins. They want the $2 billion. If you really want to change media, then we have to get media to realize that the power of the consumer is you. If your local radio station, your local television station, and yes, it might be an ABC affiliate, but most local affiliates are locally owned, and if they realize that, hey, we can have great content, we can make a lot of money by having a liberty-minded person on our programming, then that's exactly what they're going to provide to the people. Fox 19 in Cincinnati is a perfect example. Ben Swan, right? Here he is on a normal mainstream media outlet, but Fox 19 realizes that the revenue that they can generate regarding and revolving around the content he provides is worth having. That's why it's important, and I know it sounds like a selfish plug, but that's why it's important to have your radio station carrying shows like mine, and that's why it's important to develop business and become successful in business So you can start buying radio stations, television stations, newspapers. That's how you change the media. You start buying it. You become successful in business and buy it. Now, somebody asked me about Chris Duane. Chris Duane is the guy who we had on the show. He predicted economic collapse happening this fall. I don't think it's going to happen this fall, but and that's what he's doing. He has this Sons of Liberty Academy where he educates people. And again, it just shows another example of somebody who's been made aware of the truth, who doesn't want to accept it, and wants to do something about it, wants to change it to something that benefits freedom and liberty. Do I agree with everything he's doing? Of course not. But I agree with the fact that he's doing it. And I think that's really important. We need to realize, like I said earlier, we all don't have to agree, and we shouldn't focus on what we don't agree on. We have a very powerful enemy, and when one of us is focusing on what we don't agree on, it actually works to the favor of the enemy. Let's see, what else do we have down here? If nominated by the floor, well, that's not a question again, I think. How do you feel about Gary Johnson? I love the idea of getting Gary Johnson in the debates. Love it, love it, love it. I don't know if he adheres to all of the libertarian policies and such. He was recently on the show too. But I know he has enough of a contrary belief system to the two candidates that the media is trying to push down our throats that would still open the opportunity to ask questions and get people to think. See, exactly, Gary Johnson might want war and all that sort of stuff. So there's a difference between supporting him for president and supporting his campaign. We want his campaign to do well enough so he can be involved in the debates. The debates will cause people to ask questions. When people ask questions, they're going to go seek the answers, and when they search for the answers, we're going to get them to come to this freedom liberty movement. So Gary can play a great role in that, just like everybody can. So what else we have? No, Gary Johnson. I think what Gary Johnson should do is put a stage outside the debate hall for every presidential debate. As the questions are asked by the moderator, he provides answers live right outside the debate hall, and just air those either virally on the internet or whatever. Josh, do you think the TSA will ever go away? You know what? There is a possibility of the TSA going away. There are a lot of airports. Again, a lot of people don't understand this. Many airports are owned by companies. It's not like the government owns all these airports. Most airports are owned by companies. And there are airports saying to the TSA, you know what? You're making us look bad. You're making us lose business. You're causing more problems than you're helping. So they're pushing this move to get away from the TSA altogether and get back to private security. And that's definitely a possibility, and it's something that should be done, because I can tell you from experience, private security has the tendency to do a much better job than government security. What else we got? What do you think of Jesse Benton's latest comments about not nominating Ron Paul from the floor? Why do we care what Jesse Benton thinks? And in reality, why do we even care what the campaign thinks? The campaign didn't get themselves here. We did. We got this campaign to the place that they're at. We got them there. So this is what I would love to see. I would love to see Ron Paul nominated from the floor and then make them abdicate, make them step down and say, no, we don't want to accept it. Forget this idea that we have to listen to what Jesse Benton wants the campaign to do. It's not as if they're driving this thing. We're driving this thing. We decide where it ends up. And when we decide where it ends up, it's up to them to live up to our call of duty or not the other way around. I'm sick and tired of people in the campaign, whoever they might be, saying, well, this is what that needs to happen. Forget you. You didn't get us here. Jesse Benton didn't get us here. This idea, this burning passion for love and freedom and liberty, that got Ron Paul here. Now, Ron Paul lines up with that message, so I would nominate him from the floor and make him abdicate if he has to. Don't listen to Jesse Benton, period. All right, I know I kind of got loud there, but you have to sometimes. What else do we got? What do we do if the RNC tries to deny Ron Paul delegates access? We say to ourselves, why does that surprise us? No, honestly, I mean, I expect them to. See, what we have to realize is the RNC isn't going to give up easily. They're not going to want to say, oh, well, okay, we fought you for 8 years, so yeah, now just have your candidate take the floor. If it's illegal or if it's legal is kind of a moot point, because even if it's illegal, we still have to have somebody take up that cause, and if they take up the cause, it's still going to be a case that happens after the convention, and then what are you going to do? Have a delayed nomination because of a convention span? I mean, it just creates a terrible mess. So again, I say just keep making noise, keep living out freedom, don't accept the well, here's what we do. What if the RNC says, okay, you guys can't nominate him from the floor, we're not going to allow delegates access. What if we refuse to accept Romney as the nominee? Let's spin the table. What if the people just, the RNC says, hey, Romney's the nominee, and the people who are delegates and the people who are RNC chairs of counties and state RNC parties, what if they came out with statements right after the RNC convention and says, you know what, we don't recognize Mitt Romney as the nominee? What if we reversed the tables on them? What if we said, hey, you're playing our game now, bub? And the Republican Party of New York doesn't recognize the RNC's national recognition of our Mitt Romney as the nominee. See, again, we need to take this away from what is their game plan and what can we do about it, and turn it into, why are we playing their game plan anyway? When you play football, I played football. When you play football, you never play according to the enemy's game plan. You make them play according to yours. So what the conversation right now should be, and everybody can just tell them Josh came up with the idea if you want. You go out and you tell the delegates, you go out and tell county chair people, and you say, hey, don't recognize the nomination. If at the end of August, the RNC comes out with a statement that says Mitt Romney's the nominee, you, as the state chairman of the state RNC, because remember, they're the ones that kept reminding us that every state is a private club. Well, then this private club issues a statement and says, hey, we're not recognizing your nominee. Then what? Then the RNC is going to have a complete problem. They're going to be in disarray, trying to keep up with you. And wouldn't that be a nice change of pace? So that's what we really have to do. We have to get beyond this idea of how do we play the RNC's game. They rewrite their rules every year. Well, you understand what I'm saying, every time they meet. So if they're willing to rewrite the rules, why on earth do we expect them to play by those rules? It makes no sense. So we need to start playing our own game regardless of what they do. Hope that makes sense to everybody. Let's see what we got. Gigi Bowman. Yeah, come on, Gigi. That'd be fun. Spanish? Okay, walkout. Nevada is already... Hold on, slow down, people. Chill. Yeah, walking out when Mitt Romney takes the podium would be wonderful. That's it. Now we're thinking. That's another great example of not playing by their game plan. I say just don't recognize it. Not a good idea, Josh. Well, that's fine. It doesn't have to be a good idea. The point is, hold on. Credentials. Okay, the idea that the delegates could lose their credentials if they leave the floor. If the delegates aren't going to be recognized by the organization that gave them the credentials, then they really don't have credentials anyway, do they? And I understand the idea. I understand, well, as long as they keep their credentials, there's an opportunity. So maybe you time it so it doesn't matter if you lose your credentials after that point. But again, what's the point of retaining credentials if those credentials don't allow you to operate within the authority that they supposedly allow you to operate in? And there comes a point where you just have to say, not anymore. Okay, Josh, I simply say you don't want to address the Gilbert lawsuit or me. That's not it at all. That's not it at all. The Gilbert lawsuit opinion, please. Don't have one. To be honest with you. I think it's one of these situations where we find ourselves in a potential lose-lose situation because of the image and the branding that the lawsuit has taken on. It's not a lawsuit where there's an individual fighting for their right and all that sort of stuff. It's a situation where we have representation of another entity based on a lawsuit that entity is not involved in. Does that make sense? That'd be like saying, okay, Josh Tolley for president, but now there's a lawsuit where it's around the image of my campaign. Now my campaign is going to be subjugated to that result even if I'm not involved in it. So the more credence that the campaign gives an outside lawsuit that I can't be involved in, the more damage it does to my campaign, whether that's a win or a loss. And it would take a long time to explain that in detail, but that's kind of the idea there. I'm not saying that the lawsuit has no validity to it. I'm just saying the reason why a lot of Paul people seem to be against it is because it takes away from the idea of a Ron Paul victory, if that makes sense. So, I have fallen out over so many Ron Paul people about this lawsuit. And that's sad. That's sad. See, the fact that you've fallen out with people around this lawsuit proves my point. We're putting way too much credence to this lawsuit. We're putting, again, we have to get back to the point where we're united around freedom and liberty, where we're united around the idea that we can have disagreeing opinions and still be fighting for the same cause. And the reason why there's a fallout is because people are torn. Do we give credence to the lawsuit and then make our candidate look unelectable? Or do we realize that our candidate's not involved in the lawsuit, so don't get him dirty in the lawsuit itself? It's a potentially lose-lose situation. All right. The lawsuit serves as a purpose in that it exposes the corruption of the GOP leadership. Absolutely. So then it needs to be the people against XYZ, not Ron Paul versus anything. It needs to be an opportunity to expose the corruption within the GOP leadership. If the campaign gets too tied into this lawsuit, then it no longer signifies to the people who need to be woken up to the corruption that they're corrupt. I mean, let me just ask you a question. Don't Ron Paul people already know that the GOP is corrupt? And if we tie Ron Paul to the campaign, all those people who we want to expose to the truth are going to turn it off because, like challenging their belief system, they're going to push back against anything that has Ron Paul attached to it. Instead, it should be the delegates against XYZ. Josh, how do you answer this question when people reply saying, if you end the Fed, there is not enough gold? Great question, actually. The idea, hold on. I think Josh should be thinking hard on the next question for you. Maybe. End the Fed and there's not enough gold. Again, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's say we end the Fed and there's not enough gold. So what? Then the value of the gold goes up. Or we start issuing other currencies. We go back to tally sticks. We back it with other commodities. We back it with other metals. We can back it with whatever people hold as valuable. Because to be honest, I mean, if we are abstract, take ourselves off the planet, why is gold the standard? Exactly. Let's make it silver. Let's make it rubies. Let's make it shells. We could go back to having clams. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The point is the control of the currency needs to be back in the hands of the people who are operating with that currency. I don't care what the currency is valued. Well, I do, but with the understanding of if there's not enough gold, it doesn't really slow the opportunity for commerce to grow. And that's what we need to look at. Sometimes we focus too much on the claws of the bear rather than shooting the bear itself. Let's see. What the clause election fraud and cheating is about. Nope, I don't make that too fast. I'm reading. Hold on a second. How can there not be enough gold? As the value goes up, the nuggets will get smaller. Exactly. It's called the reevaluation of currency. So you can easily do that, and you could add other things to value the same currency, like gold and silver, sticks, wood. It doesn't really matter. And the point is, we just need to get back to a place where the currency is of the people, by the people, and all that sort of stuff. Hemp has great value. That's right, hemp oil. I mean, and other cultures have used other things. Beads, for goodness sakes, fur, anything can be used as a currency. And what we need to realize is not the argument of what the currency needs to be, but the fact that the people need to control it. When we get back to that, then we can argue about the valuation of said currency. So, hope that makes sense. Until another question pops up, I want to go back to what Ron Paul Radio said about the delegates to having their credentials taken. It is a hard place to be. I mean, if you're going to have your credentials taken away and it nullifies anything you do at the convention, that's terrible. If you're going to have your credentials taken away and you're no longer part of the club back at your state, that's terrible. Especially when you look at all the growth we've made in party inroads, I guess, in states and counties. But there has to be some sort of line. If you're not going to protest at the convention, and that's great, then I need to know what your line is. Because at some point, you need to be willing to say my credentials aren't worth it. Where's that point? We need that point. And we need to have this ability for this process to continue to grow and change. What I would love to see happen is the next election cycle, the RNC is pretty much neutered because the RNC back at the state level is so turned around by freedom-loving people in the state parties that they have no bite. I get it. So there has to be some strategy, but you just can't say, okay, go ahead and shoot me, because I hope that in 4 years that I'm going to get control of the ball back, not realizing that between now and then they can just switch the rules again and somehow get you out. So it's a hard road to hoe, and that's why there's conversations about it. And I mean, you have to think about this too while we're waiting for another question. Oh, hold on. If the RNC and the DNC consider themselves a private party, why do they get our taxes? Great question. That's an absolutely great question. And that's one of those things where we have to realize, wait a second, is our government also a private club? Is our government also a private party? And there are many people saying that after 1871 it is. So there's some legitimacy to that. And exactly, so why keep playing by RNC rules? So this is why this discussion is so vital and so important. Why? Bottom line is you have to have a line where you say, you know what, I don't care about the credentials because I don't care about the entity that's providing the validity to the credentials. That's all I'm saying. What do you say to people who say that the GOP doesn't want to work with us? Well, they don't. The national GOP doesn't want to work with us. I mean, keep in mind, Ryan's Priebus and the GOP. The GOP ran against Rand Paul. Now, I'm not here to say, hallelujah, Rand Paul. I'm just saying the GOP is willing to fight itself in order to keep its control over the party. They're willing to take on people who want to be Republican candidates in order to keep the Republican Party the party that they want it to be. And there comes a time where that party either needs to change or cease to exist. So the follow-up conversation should be, when do we replace it? And if we take over, they will have to work with us or get out. If we can take over, that's the problem. This is like a referee who writes the rules of a football game as we're running down the field. We're running towards the goal, and they have the ability to rewrite the rules as we're running, and then they say, oh, no, not legitimate, we're not going to recognize it. So there's two action plans here. There's one, take over, and hey, awesome. And then the other one is, if a takeover is impossible, then what? Because they're counting on a takeover not being possible, and eventually, all you Ron Paul delegates, all you Ron Paul loving people are just going to roll over because in 4 years he's not going to be here anyway, and they're going to sell you with the idea that a Chris Christie or a Marco Rubio or a Paul Ryan is close enough, and a lot of you, because we didn't have that line of where we're not willing to compromise, a lot of you are going to say, well, okay, we have to start somewhere, and we're going to find ourselves back at 1998, and we're just going to fight this whole thing over and over again. And we have to have, at least at some point, a line where we say, this shall not pass. Us or to to go along with our way of thinking. There's no reason to. There's no reason to. It's kind of like in a fight. The person who's willing to die very, very rarely loses the fight. Well, we're not willing to die if we're willing to say, die politically. If we're not willing to say, you know what, there comes a point where I'm not going to play your game. There comes a point where I'm not going to compromise freedom, I'm not going to compromise liberty, and I'm not going to allow this to happen. And if they take away credentials, fine. Then let the world see that the RNC is the one that did it. Turn it around. Be able to make them see that it's the RNC that's not playing right. It's the RNC that's not playing nice. And you'll never know. Maybe the Democrat Party will say, hey, maybe we need to change our position. The Libertarian Party might say, hey, here's our opportunity to grow and change, and they can take the opportunity to point out the corruption in the RNC. There's a lot of things that can happen, but we have to have a lot of strategy in that game plan. We just can't go along with their strategy and hope that someday it works out. It doesn't work that way. This effort has been tried in the past to take over the RNC. So we have to realize that it's not necessarily going to give us the outcome that we want, and we need to be prepared for that. That's my point. More Dems voted against NDA. Exactly. See, exactly. Patriot Watchdog. Amen. Amen. Why do you think that all the mainline Republicans are willing to look the other way? Because it's become a business. They get rewarded to look the other way. They're professional politicians, and from a professional standpoint, it makes sense for them to look away. Like I said before, if they fix the problem, if they actually advance liberty and freedom, they're doing themselves a disservice as they're working themselves out of relevancy. That's why if we got back to a system where the government was part-time and they had to live with the decisions they were making on behalf of us, we would see a completely different form of politician. Plus, they're stupid. Josh, how do we get our government to comply with what the people want? You start locally. Local, 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 local. Your county should be a libertarian bastion, man. That should be, your county should be exactly where freedom is growing. And then, when the federal government comes, your constitutional abiding sheriff, your constitutional abiding county board says, hey, not in our county, and if you show up here again, we're putting you in jail. And then guess what? The other person's county is going to do the same thing, and the other person's county is doing the same thing. Our focus should not be how do we win the White House. Our focus should be how do we win 3,600 counties in the United States. We need to get back to winning our counties, winning our communities, winning our neighborhoods, winning our city boards. That's how you get the people to, or the government to comply with people. The problem we have right now is they don't have to. We've seen it in 2010, right? 2010 was supposed to be this influx of candidates that were liberty-minded, the Tea Party or whatever. And all these candidates got to Washington, D.C., and they all turned on us. Part of the reason is there's a buffer between us and D.C. You don't have access to those people. They create their own barrier between you and them, so they never have to be held accountable. Matter of fact, we even have a law now that says if the Secret Service is present, you can't even protest. But it's different when you look at the local level. When your city, council, whatever board, the council member could live down the street from you. If he starts doing things that are in line with NDA 2012 or Agenda 21 or whatever, you can hold him accountable because you see him at the grocery store, you see him at the kids' Little League game or what have you. So we need to get back to a point where we focus our political action on politicians that we have access to. It just makes sense. Why should I be focusing on politicians that I can't hold accountable? That'd be like me telling the kid down the street when his bedtime is, even though I don't live in that house and I'm not his parent. I have no access to enforce it. I can enforce my actions and my will upon the politicians that are locally accessible to me. If you want to see government change, that's what has to happen. There should be a campaign to change 3,000 counties. That should be our push. That should be the message. Local government is by votes. How do we stop the fraud? Local government is by vote, and there is fraud in local government. But like I said, you can hold people accountable. If you actually worked to with your neighborhood and you held meetings at your homes, kind of like Neighborhood Watch. You start educating people, getting people involved, and you elected Bob, and Bob was supposed to adhere to the Constitution, and he doesn't, then Bob can get ridiculed at the grocery store. He's going to be afraid to go to the local mall because he's going to see people who he knows that he turned his back on. The reason why you see corruption, this is key, the reason why you see corruption in city and county elections is because we're not involved enough in them to hold them accountable in the first place. Because they know that when they have a city or a county or even a state election, 5% turnout is considered a great turnout. That's the problem. That's why fraud can exist there. If there was a 60% turnout for local elections, fraud would cease to exist in local elections because the local people would know that the fraud happened. The problem is now that most people you talk to don't understand that the fraud is happening at a local level. So if you change that paradigm, and once again get back to this point where we make them play our game, the game changes. It's hard enough. Hold on, that wasn't to me. Let's see what else we have. We should also have to register every 4 years at least. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so why aren't all the issues of fraud in caucuses for Paul not being held accountable? Well, actually, they are in places where people are locally active. Look what happened in St. Charles, Missouri. They tried to arrest, I forgot his name. But they tried to arrest that guy who was, trying to impact change, charge him with trespassing, and look what happened. Because it was locally they were held to account, and locally he is now leading that party because people became active at that county level, and it did hold people accountable, and it did result in change. And that's exactly why we're seeing the successes in places where we are seeing them. So that's the way it goes. It happens that way. Josh, looks like Doug Paul. Oh man, that's no bueno. No bueno, no bueno. I can do probably another 20 minutes or so, just to let you know. I'm glad to help out in any way we can. Keep the questions coming. This is fun. And here's the other thing. I don't always have to be right either. This idea that talk show hosts or media people or whatever are always right, I'm not that arrogant. If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. I'm willing to be wrong. But come at me with some proof. Change the way I think. It's an interesting challenge. Job Secret Service Bill HR affects more than just who Secret Service can protect. It also removes requirement for those charged to be tried in Article 3 court. Opens the door for military tribunals. Oh, it's scary. It's freaky scary. Freaky scary. Does anyone have any legitimate authority or power over you personally for any reason? Oh, now that's almost a philosophical answer. Does anybody have any legitimate authority? And that kind of leads into a broader discussion about what is government and should there be government in the first place? Should there be anarchy? That's way too huge for this conversation, to be honest with you. And that's the question of man for thousands of years. And I guess it comes down to consent, exactly. It comes down to consent. And that's, again, another perfect lead into why the smaller the government, the more powerful the government. And I know that seems contradictory to everything that they tell you in school and poli-sci classes. But in reality, if the government only had in your local community 300 people in your village to worry about, then it's up to those 300 people what sort of role the government would play in their lives. So the next village over could have less government. The next city over could have more government. And people would have the ability to move into communities that they want. Some people want more protection. Some people want more services. If you had a government that had, or a community that had more older people and women, well, they would probably want more services for their tax dollar than a city that was mostly middle-aged men who could build the roads themselves. Make sense? So it all comes down to consent and size. When voting fails, at what point are we allowed to take out? Oh, man. I don't have an answer to that question. I know that. I know that. Excuse me. I know that question's out there, but man, that's that's the atomic question. Collapse of the U.S. dollar near? You know what? I think the collapse of the U.S. dollar has already happened. I mean, people are under this impression that when the economy collapses, it's going to be like some apocalyptic movie where there's roving gangs in the streets, and some bartender owns the neighborhood, and it's not going to look like that. That comes after the collapse. The collapse is going to look like losing 90% of your buying power, having two people work to replace the income of one person 20 years ago, going from a nickel for a loaf of bread when I was born to $1.30. That's more than inflation. That looks like a collapse, and in reality, I think we're collapsed already. Josh, how do you deal with name calling from both the left and right for supporting Ron Paul? I love it. I love being called names for supporting Ron Paul because it allows me the opportunity to say, hey, at least I stood for something. And if you stay in contact with the people who call you names for your support, it allows you to go back and say, who's your daddy now? When in 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, the people are complaining about their politician. And it allows you the opportunity to say, I don't support Ron Paul. I support the same thing Ron Paul supports. And the larger question to me is, why don't you? What is it about being wealthy nation that you don't like? What is it about having an opportunity to raise your children that you don't like? I mean, you don't have to support Ron Paul, but if you don't and you want to insult me for doing it, let's reverse this. Please tell me why you don't support him. And that allows people to ask questions. Okay, folks, peace. I got my question answered. Woo, thanks, Josh. Okay, cool. Let's go back up here. Excuse me, Josh. How do you deal? Oh, I just answered that one. Josh, what about concentration camps in the U.S.? Scares the bejeebies out of me. You never write a law if you don't have an intention of using it at some point. You never allocate land and resources if you don't intend to use it at some point. Whether they call them concentration camps, re-education camps, prisons, I don't care what they call them. And it kind of leads us into an interesting point, too. The number of felonies are rising in this nation, and it's kind of like people are being sent to FEMA camps without us even realizing it. Because in many cases, felons can't vote. So we're having a situation where there's 1 million to 2 million new felons every year, and they're being stripped of their right to vote. Well, what does that say to you? It says to me that we just put them through a concentration camp without actually having to send them away forever anyway. And that's why there's this rise in felony charges. It has nothing to do with the law. It has nothing to do with keeping the peace. It has to do with classifying them as felons and taking away their ability to own firearms and to vote. The two biggest abilities that you should be able to retain. Now, granted, there are some ways to get that ability to own a firearm back, but it still proves my point. And that's why we need to fight felony convictions. I'm all for misdemeanor convictions, man. If you run a red light and hit me, I want you to be held accountable. But the idea of a felony that strips away the two most important things it means to be an American is very dangerous, and it's an issue that nobody's really talking about until 2:30 right now on August 16th. Okay, so what else we got? Okay, another. If dollar collapse and the government tries to hurt us like cattle, what do we do then? You're already cattle. I don't know if you know this right now. You're already cattle. The problem isn't what happens if they try to make us cattle. The question is, now that we know we're cattle, how do we get out of here and become free-range beef? And that's the question. We're asking the wrong question if we ask the question, what do we do when they try to control us? They already control us. You can't build what you want to build. You can't see, or you can't operate what you want to operate. There's parental laws. There's so many laws that we're already stuck anyway. We're already cattle. Now we just have to figure out how to break out. Josh, when and where can folks hear you? I love that question. Sometimes I forget to talk about You can listen to the show on stations near you. I strongly, strongly urge, call your local station. We have a tendency in the freedom and liberty movement to think that, well, as long as I can get it on the internet, that's all I need to do. Or as long as I can get clips on YouTube, that's all I need to do. That doesn't impact change. Change happens when this show, my show, and shows like mine, I'm not egotistical to say I'm the only one, but when shows like mine make it to the local airwaves, because see, on the internet, the only people who hear me are the people who want to hear me, and that, trust me. But the other thing we need to do is to make it so when people are driving down the road and they hit the seek button on their radio, they come across me. And even if they just listen for a minute, it hits them and they say, "Whoa, wait a second." That's how we impact change. And if you want a press kit to send to your local talk station, just contact us. Go to joshtully.com, joshtully.com. Matter of fact, I'll type it in here, joshtully.com, and we'll send you a press kit because we do have one, and then you send it to local stations. The show is growing because people are asking their local stations, demanding it. And call SiriusXM, call them and demand it. Call Fox News, demand that I get on television. If you support what I'm saying and you support the idea that I talk about and all that sort of stuff, definitely get that out there. Okay, I'm going to get back to another question. When am I going to run for office and which one? I get asked that question every day. And yeah, iHeartRadio, they don't carry us now. iHeartRadio is owned by Premier and Clear Channel. But definitely contact them. I would love to get on their stations and kind of occupy mainstream media. That'd be epically awesome. What question was I about to answer? I forgot. Oh, I also want to tell you, people think that, yeah, I'm on GCN right before Alex with the lead-in show to Alex. Oh, yes, The Office. Thank you, Ed. Man, you guys are on top of it. I get asked the question every day, when am I going to run for office? I've even been asked by some major political party to run for office. LOL, Clear Channel's owned by Romney. I know it's kind of crazy, but I would love to be on their stations because it'd be kind of like... Anyway, not yet. I'm not old enough to be president. Not that I would run for president right out of the gate anyway. What I'm doing now is impacting culture. Culture creates candidates. Candidates don't create the culture. If I can spend 10 years or so impacting the culture, I think then that would lead into a great opportunity to run for office as the people who are living in the nation, in the culture that I just helped transform, realize what I can offer them if they send me to the state capitol or Washington, D.C. or whatever. So that's my take on running for office. I do help politicians, though. If you have any politicians who are running for office and they want to win, have them contact us. I can coach them into how to convey an idea so people understand it, how to brand yourself, how to get your message out there, and all that sort of stuff. Which also leads me into another point. A lot of people think, oh, well, you know, talk radio, y'all are doing wonderful. We ask for your support all the time because we want to grow and we want to get more stations and more equipment. You can become part of our program, our membership program, for $9.95. I strongly suggest you do that because one of the things I do that no other talk show host in the world does is we do a reading program where we'll go through books on topics of all sorts, and I'll take my background as a business and behavioral strategist. We'll work through those books together, and we'll get the most out of the experts that are out in the world today and prior. So it's definitely something that's special, along with the show emailed to you every day and all that sort of stuff. So, what else do we have for questions? What will be the next big false flag? Unlike some of my counterparts in the radio world, I do not predict false flags. As soon as you predict a false flag, it allows the enemy to cancel said false flag and make you look like the one who loses credibility. So to predict a false flag actually shows a mild ignorance to the subject matter itself. Not the fact that it doesn't happen, it does, but just the idea of being able to predict it shows you don't understand what it truly is. So I cannot predict the next false flag. And I hope that made sense. Can we ever avert false flags by conjecturing good ones? Good question, actually. That's a really good question. Um, I think the best way to man, that's you got me thinking. We have to look at the purpose behind the false flag. Not all false flags lead to the same purpose. Not all false flags are even, um, violent ones. Sometimes you can have false flags in the stock market, and we've seen a number of them already this year, where for unexpected reasons, the stock market take, either a steep dive or a rapidly steep increase. You can have false flags there, and then they come out with the idea of, oh, well, look, there was a computer error and, a digit switched, and that's what happened. And in reality, what you witnessed was a transfer of wealth to the tune of $20 billion to some other entity. So you have to be careful on what the false flag is. I think sometimes we classify false flags as violent acts of war, and there's so many other forms of false flags, from student councils and everything. It's a broad subject. Josh, have you seen Charlie Daniels' Behold the Pale Horse? No, I don't think I have, actually. I don't think I have. Pretty much it comes down to who cares about Jesse. Amen to that. I mean. Oh, cool. A link. Awesome. All right. I'll check that out. What other questions do you have? I have about 5 minutes before I got to bounce. I know I'm taking more time than I was allotted, and I appreciate that. But Doug Weed didn't show up. He's on I have his phone number. I should call him and yell at him for you. Josh, what are your thoughts on property taxes in regards to the Communist Manifesto? I think property tax and the whole idea that we don't own property in the first place is just absolutely crazy. It's just absolutely nuts. Anybody who thinks you own property in today's world, you're absolutely out of your mind. You don't own it. I don't care where it is. You don't own it. So good luck. And if you really want to fight for freedom, there's a lot to be said for renting until we actually get to a point where we restore freedom, and then repurchasing the property in a manner that allows you actual ownership. So, Josh, who schedules your guests? I have a few different people who do that depending on the topic. The best thing to do if you have a guest in mind is to go to the website. We have one of those, generic little contact us forms like everybody has. Fill that out, send it in, and whoever books that genre. Like, for example, like entertainment guests versus political guests versus Middle Eastern guests. It all depends. So whoever your suggested guest is, we'll make sure it goes to the right person, and they'll work on booking that person. Josh, will you be at Paul Fest? Unfortunately, I will not be, but that doesn't mean I don't support the cause. That's why I'm willing to spend 2 hours here. But unfortunately, no, I won't be. But I definitely support the message and the effort. So, and I hope that you don't see that as a negative. It's really not. I wish I could be and all that sort of stuff, but it just circumstantially didn't work out. But I definitely support the effort, and again, that's why I'm spending so much time promoting it, even though I can do that. Adam Kokesh is a guest. Yeah, Kokesh has been on a few times, actually. I'm sure he'll be on again in the future. I love talking to him. He's kind of thought-provoking. Once again, somebody who I don't always agree with, but at least we agree on the premise that freedom is the most important thing. Let's see. Josh, I followed your advice, and I quit my job. Thanks. Left in the great sense. Amen. Hallelujah! Cyborg War, send me an email telling me about your story, because I love it when I can use actual testimony from people. It's wonderful. We get emails from people who say, Josh, I almost killed myself until I bought your book, and all that sort of stuff. It's a powerful book. Favorite Lady of Liberty female fighting fighter? Favorite Lady of Liberty female freedom fighter? That's a good question. I have my favorites. I kind of feel like Jeremy Richter when they're talking about people in the media. I like Tracy Diaz. I like Gigi Bowman. I like Amanda Billy Rock. I like them all, actually. I like them all. I like them all. And the great thing about women being involved in this movement is women bring so much passion to it that it's just inspiring. Sometimes men are so linear thinking And when you see women get involved, it's just like, Ed, yes, I am smart. I'm a strategist. Of course I'm thinking. Adam, okay, I did that. Adam Kovic has been a guest. Will you be at the rally on Sunday? Great question. We're trying to work out those details right now. I don't know. I know that I have been invited to broadcast from inside the RNC, which is something that, due to my discontent with the RNC, it doesn't look like I'm going to do. I think me being there actually gives them too much credence and credit. I think one of the reasons why they allowed me to do it is because they're recognizing, and humbly, this is humbly, it really, but they're recognizing the power that this show is having, and they're thinking that by allowing us access to it and broadcasting from it, it allows them some validity. And in reality, my validity comes from freedom, liberty, and the Constitution and the ideas that I support and the people. I stand up for the people, not party. I stand up for principle, not politicians. And if they plan on hijacking that and piggybacking on me for their good name, then I just, I don't know. I'm not a puppet, exactly. Well, that's why I should do it. You're not a puppet. Well, that's true. And then that's why we're, there's a lot to consider. And there's a lot to consider from a broadcast standpoint, too. All these decisions aren't as simple as easy as people would like them to be. There's some logistical issues. There's, there's a bunch of stuff going into it. So I don't know. I hope so. It's definitely not going to change my message or what we stand for, so that's for sure. That's her Paul March going to be blocked by police. I don't know. I'm so disappointed with police lately. If you're not a subscriber to the YouTube channel, you definitely should. It's free. But we've been putting on so many videos on police. It's absolutely crazy. Like the police that forcibly removed that woman's tampon in public. Police are just irritating the bejeebies out of me. Your proudest moment in the freedom movement so far? My personal favorite for myself was getting kicked off stage because I supported Ron Paul. That was my proudest moment. My proudest moment as a movement in general is when that newest person wakes up. When that newest person says, you know what, I want to live for freedom. So I get to relive that proudest moment every day. So that's the proudest moment. I love it when I see all of you doing things. I love that because that makes me full of pride, because my pride in this effort I know is bigger than me. I want this to continue. I want this to be for my wife and family when I ever get lucky enough to have a wife and family. I want it to be for my grandkids. So my proudest moment has to be, if the movement is bigger than me, then my proudest moment has to be bigger than me too. So it's whenever I see somebody wake up to that realization of freedom and liberty and hope. And I got about 4 minutes, maybe less. So any other final questions? A police state is a socialist state, absolutely. I appreciate Ron Paul Radio for having you on today, Mr. Well, yes, I appreciate the opportunity too. I love the opportunity. I love to be asked, and it's very cool. Good show. Thank you. I appreciate that, Benjamin. Gary Johnson, if things go horrible. Again, I am fully behind Gary's campaign to get him to 15% or whatever we need to do in order to get him in the debates. I don't agree with him on everything. I would much rather see Ron Paul. And I think it's something that everybody has to decide on their own. What's their vote going to be? Sit out, vote for Gary, whatever. Just don't compromise. Yes, thank you for your efforts. No one but Paul. No one but Paul, absolutely. First time caller. Awesome. Never compromise. Exactly. There are things you can compromise on. You can compromise on, like, resource allocation. And itself isn't bad. But you should never compromise on freedom, liberty, and your principles, your core foundation. You should never compromise those. And we see that all the time. with politicians, and some of them who we even thought were the ones, and just doesn't happen to be that way. There's a link to Daily Paul, is Gary Johnson a fake libertarian? It's a great question. Again, I'm not saying I agree with Gary on everything, but I love the idea of getting him at least in the debates, so it allows us, you and I and everybody who's watching, the opportunity to raise questions and keep the conversation going. So I hope we get to that. All right, since there's no more questions and I got to go, I'm actually over. I'm out of here. So I don't know who takes over next or what I do with this, but if whoever does the hosting could do whatever they do, it'd be awesome. And thank you all. Thank you for listening to the show. Thanks for being here and listening to me rant on some things. So awesome. The show airs Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. We have listeners in all 50 states and 150 nations around the world. Subscribe to the YouTube. Follow me on Facebook. Subscribe to become a member if you can. Just go to joshtully.com, click membership. We would really love that. Call your local station. Say, hey, we need that Josh Tully show. Oh, also, before I get out of here, I wanted to tell you about something that I'm actually developing over the last day or two. There have been a lot of people who've come up to me and said, Josh, how do I go from politically active to politically effective? How do I go from wanting to do and impact change to actually making that change? So we're coming up with this really cool sort of seminar thing, and it's called Watering Your Grassroots, because I love grassroots, but I'm recognizing that grassroots needs a little push, just a little push. So we're calling it Watering Your Grassroots, going from politically active to politically effective. It's going to be a seminar that there's like 14 or 15 parts in, and it's going to take you from a point where you're woken up and you know about the truth to a point where you can convey that truth and actually get people to change their mind. Because people kept asking me, Josh, how do you do that? I want to do that too. So I'm actually going to teach people how to do that. So keep an eye out for that. If you know you want to attend or you want more information, we don't have it available yet. So this is something that is really, really new. Just go to the website, joshtully.com, fill out the little contact us form. Let us know who you are and all that sort of stuff, and we'll get it back to you. So, all right, I'm out of here. Host, if you could take back over, that'd be awesome. YouTube channel, thank you, everybody, for putting that up. So, out of here. Have a good one, guys.